Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Thunderbird Community Office Hours. We're here to talk about a very exciting project, one that we've been talking about at conferences for a while now, and that's Thunderbird for Android. In general, what the Thunderbird status is on mobile, and I know that a lot of people are excited to learn about what the updates are in this space. So I'm joined with my co-host, Monica. My name's Heather, of course. And then we have Wolf, cketti, and Philipp. This is the current mobile team. But there's lots of contributors as well that participate in the development. So Wolf, let's pass it to you if you want to say anything about who you are, how long you've been on the project, and maybe what your area of expertise is on the project.
Yeah, hi. My name is Wolf, and I joined roughly 2 years on the Thunderbird team and started working on the so-called K9 app, then transforming that to Thunderbird. And yeah, my background is mobile development for a really, really long time. And now taking the challenge to write some Android code and hopefully make Thunderbird better than it was before. And yeah, that's about me, Berlin-based, and yeah.
Nice. Thank you. cketti, how about yourself?
Hey, I go by cketti. Like Wolf, I also live in Berlin. I joined the Thunderbird project together with K9 Mail, and before that, I worked on K9 Mail for 13 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now I'm mostly comfortable working on the back end and email protocols and stuff. But of course, occasionally I also do UI stuff. On Android, we do everything because we're just very few people.
Great. Philipp, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Philipp. I've been with Thunderbird for quite some time. I think 2006 or so was my first dive into the project, and been doing a lot of other things around Thunderbird. But I joined the mobile team as a manager last year, and really excited about how the project is going forward.
Nice. Real quick, question, since Wolf and cketti, you guys both live in Berlin, do you ever get together, work together, hang out? I don't know. I'm not sure if you guys live far away from each other.
Yeah, I live in Hamburg. It's about 2.5 hours by train. So we do have the opportunity more than, randomly traveling to California or something like that. So definitely more opportunity, and used that once last year to do like a work week and really, first of all, get to know the team while after I joined, but also just to also do a few fun things. But cketti, Wolf, I think you might have a little bit more opportunity than me living in the same city.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah,
we work from home like everybody in the team, so we don't meet too often. We did meet for a release party. We had cake and coffee, right?
Yeah, and once in a while I have time to join the Android meetup, so I see you there. And besides that, yeah, Berlin is big enough so that the chances that you meet is pretty low if you work from home anyway. But yeah, I think there are some occasions where we met, but not so often as you would think.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, mostly not for work, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's good. Well, the three of you will meet at FOSDEM this, pretty soon, weekend after next. So that's exciting. More team building opportunities, I suppose. Okay, well, let's dive into our topic. And I think to kind of set the stage, the team has put together a little presentation to kind of, set the tone of the topic. So, Philipp, do you want to take it away?
Sure, let's do that. So, Thunderbird has really long been associated with the desktop application. You have it on mobile, you have it on Mac OS, Linux, Windows. But, one of the questions we've really commonly been getting over the years was, but what about mobile? I want this on my phone. I have it on my desktop already. I want it here as well. Or, oh, I don't really use my desktop as much. I really would like to have a way to use Thunderbird on my mobile as well. And we really weren't able to answer that question with, oh yeah, sure, it's right around the corner, just because of the differences. You can't just kind of take a desktop application and install it on your phone. So, what do you actually do then? You either find a way to tackle that mountain of work and get things done. That really might take a long while, and you might have that initial hurdle of, oh yeah, this was easy. We can already show some email, but then getting it to a really polished application takes a while. And the other option is to, find someone to partner with and, take an existing piece of open source and apply a little bit of Thunderbird touch to it. And, really support open source in that way. So cketti for a long time has been maintaining K9 Mail very successfully. So, we just asked him if K9 could become Thunderbird, and he said yes. Granted, it was a little bit more complicated than that. But, how do we actually get from a K9 Mail to Thunderbird? We always knew that it should be more than just, different colors and then we're done. It should kind of feel like a Thunderbird. If you have your desktop Thunderbird and you're installed, you'd like to have it a little bit like, okay, yeah, I see that concept. That's kind of similar. So it really feels like a Thunderbird. So with cketti and Wolf on board, me joining last year, we have a little bit more punch behind that to really, move Thunderbird forward. And last year was then the year where we said, okay, this is when we're doing it. We initially didn't have any of that pressure to release. Anything we do really is supporting K9 Mail, and eventually will become Thunderbird. So it wasn't like, oh, we need to get this done immediately. We had a lot of great ideas in the community. Those from the other MZLA teams on design, product folks, and a lot of good ideas. But eventually we really wanted to get to a point where we have that baseline. We have a way to say, okay, this is where we're at right now, and we want to get better, and we want to get better with everyone together. So
quick question. That graph in the bottom, what's the orange and the blue line?
The orange is the 28-day average that Google puts in there, and the blue is like the current to date. So yeah, we are now at over 200,000 monthly active users, which is pretty exciting for such a short time, and really happy on how that turned out so far. But yeah, it's on the Play Store, it's on F-Droid. We wanted to provide the two mechanisms that we had before, and really looking forward to seeing what we can start building from here. Last but not least, it's not just us. There's a bunch of people that put work into this. This is just a subset of the people, and mainly focusing on the time from the announcement of K9 is joining the Thunderbird family to release. We had a bunch of people come when the beta was released, saying, hey, I really enjoy this. I would like to contribute something. So really appreciative of all the many people that have made Thunderbird for Android what it is today.
That's great. That's great. I love to see the community participation there, as well as Thunderbird supporting open source in such a wonderful way it's meant to be, I think. Yeah, thank you very much for that quick little dive into what the project is. Monica and I have some questions for you guys. And I'll start things off. What is new with Thunderbird for Android?
I think I could take that question.
Yeah, sure. I'm not really sure who to direct these to, so just anyone pipe up.
We'll take them as they come.
What's new with Thunderbird for Android? Well, there's a lot of similarities to K9 in general. So K9 went side by side with the Thunderbird development. And the biggest chunk for the first steps to go in the direction of a Thunderbird for Android app was to rewrite the first-time user experience. So start with adding like a onboarding experience that lets you easier add your accounts to the app. This is done or was done for both apps, K9 and Thunderbird. And during that process, well, the project opened up for more features, more variations for modularization to tackle the next big thing was like adapting Material 3. This involved like a huge rewrite of a lot of code of the apps to allow doing that. And that set the foundation to have a K9 app alongside a Thunderbird for Android app. And then I think to start at a differences between both apps, we added a possibility to import your data from the desktop app to the Thunderbird for Android app. And that's the first feature that is exclusive for the Thunderbird version. That allows you a seamless transition from, if you are a Thunderbird desktop user, you have the possibility to just like export your settings via QR code, scan it with your mobile phone on the Thunderbird for Android app, and take over all your account data to a mobile phone to have like a seamless transition between both. And then also to take ideas and patterns from the desktop app and apply them where possible to the mobile app. You won't see so much at the moment, but this is a pattern you will see in the future, that more and more features or also designs getting closer to each other. And then, we have a little makeover that cketti did to reduce confusion about this so-called folder classes, where you get notification settings based on what type of folder you had. But to be honest, no one was really aware what it's doing. So that got removed. And a lot of little tiny changes here and there to rule out some edges, and most of the things you won't see. They're under the hood. There's a lot of rewrite to open the app and modernize the app, and this is an ongoing effort to allow us to develop an Android app in a more modern way. And as it has a lot of history due to this really, really long lifetime of K9, it takes some time to adapt to new technologies. So while we introduced the new onboarding experience, we adapted Jetpack Compose, the new Android UI framework. And a lot of like these little things in the background, they just take a huge amount of time. So please be patient with us if some of your desired features are not landing really soon, because like there is a lot of work in the background that still is ongoing. But we think at some point we reach a point where it's not as hard to move things around, and this frees us up to do more user-related and not too much just changing code that you won't see.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's actually, if you kind of want the detailed, like kind of history of this process that Wolf just gave a really great overview of, if you go to the blog, and if you're watching this on YouTube, which will, or YouTube or TIL vids, we'll put a link to the Android progress report blog post and kind of we covered kind of all of these steps from the first time onboarding to material 3. This still comes out every month, and it's a great way to kind of keep track of kind of how we're developing and kind of what's new.
Yeah, and one topic I forgot, this is the latest addition to Thunderbird for Android is inclusion of funding possibilities beside, like, we have some donation links on the webpage, and we now added also a subscription and in-app purchases to support the progress of Thunderbird for Android. And yeah, this allows us to do all that what we're doing because we're based on funding basically, and to hire more people or to get more manpower to tackle this beast.
And it's actually really easy. I think, if you just install Thunderbird right now and just go to support Thunderbird in the settings, then you could probably do it by the end of these office hours.
Yes.
That sounds like a great challenge. Well, that's awesome. Well, I think that you kind of covered kind of like what are the kind of differences from, K9 going into this process into what has become Thunderbird for Android. But I will say this is a question that we get a lot in reviews and on our social platforms is we've made it so that K9 can be supported in parallel with the Thunderbird. That right now, the code is almost identical, if not identical. It's just a different brand. How long will K9 be supported in parallel with Thunderbird for Android?
Sure, I can take that one. I believe in the previous blog post we said at least a year. I think that's a reasonable target to aim for. Though I do think we can be a little bit flexible on that. It's not when this date comes, we will stop doing the thing. There's certainly a little bit of effort required to make sure that both apps, that features can be developed for both apps. But in the end, it doesn't outweigh the fact that we really want to have this opportunity for both. There's people that prefer K9 Mail. They like the robot dog a lot more than the bird, for example, on that path. But also just, why stop a completely perfectly working application when there's no need? So I think what we'll likely do is kind of take a look at how the adoption is. Why are people staying on K9 Mail? What's missing for them to make that switch? And look at, the usage numbers. And if there comes a point in the future where it's the other way around, where, K9 Mail still has a sizable, or where Thunderbird for Android has, millions and millions of users, and K9 Mail happens to be that small piece that's just getting started, then I think we can maybe make a decision to say, okay, let's move those remaining users over as much as we can and then continue with one app.
And I think with like a shared code base, it's going to mean effectively a zero maintenance burden to carry both at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's worse. Sorry.
It's not really zero, but it's much easier than maintaining two totally separate apps, but there's still a cost involved. And initially there was talk, do we just, move K9 Mail and rename it, make it Thunderbird for Android, or stop doing K9 Mail and going forward use the same code base but call it Thunderbird for Android? But then a lot of people mentioned that they like the brand and they wanted to continue. So we figured what's the next best thing we can do, because we can manage to maintain two totally separate apps, even if they have the same starting point. So we said, okay, we will do a white label app where we can have one code base and build two separate apps. We do have tiny things that are different from one app to the other, but it's mostly the same app right now.
I'm curious. I've encountered some people that have been K9 users for a long time, and they didn't know that they didn't know about Thunderbird for Android. So I'm curious, is there like some sort of information bubble or something that would ever appear in K9 to let people know, like, hey, by the way, there's Thunderbird for Android that is effectively the same?
Yeah, we might do that at some point in the future. We don't have that right now.
Okay.
Given they are essentially the same app, there's no immediate rush to say, hey, all those users better get over to Thunderbird because we're about to discontinue it. But,
right.
We can, we had our release last year. We're very much focused on some of the release feedback. And I think that's more important than that migration piece and, trying to move users from one app to the other.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, so I have another question that I have actually heard a lot. There are a lot of Thunderbird for Desktop users that have been using Thunderbird for Desktop for ages and ages. And one of the value adds that a lot of people find with the desktop client is the add-on space. And so people become dependent on certain add-ons and want to know if they will work, if those same Thunderbird add-ons will work for Thunderbird for Android.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a Thunderbird add-on developer myself, and I'd love to just say, hey, now that I'm managing this, I'm just going to make it happen, snap. But, if you look at like the history of this project, as opposed to, for example, Firefox for Android, there are two completely different approaches. K9 Mail is a separate application. It was built as K9 Mail without obviously any thoughts around Thunderbird and Mozilla, whereas Firefox for Android was built on the Gecko codebase. And Gecko, the platform that Firefox, Thunderbird, and also Firefox for Android is built on, supports add-ons. And we can't just magically, take that and integrate it into the app. Not to say it's completely out of the picture. It's hard. It's not impossible, though. We could potentially say, hey, we're going to take the mail extensions API, like that subset of APIs, and see if we can add an implementation for that. There are certainly some difficulties in doing that. It's not a focus for this year just because there's a bunch of other things we'd like to get done. Focus on user feedback a little bit and productivity. Once we have a little bit more of a level playing field, then we can maybe consider if there's a way that we could integrate aspects of it.
That's nice to know that it's not completely off the table for, forever. And I think it makes perfect sense to anybody watching that it would be a later nice to have kind of project than an urgent one that needs to be addressed immediately. Thanks.
Yeah. And speaking of future plans for Thunderbird and kind of things that will be coming maybe kind of this year, kind of versus things that will be coming kind of in a more kind of in a slightly longer term, what major things are on the horizon for Thunderbird for Android?
Absolutely. That's a good question. Very timely because we're going to post a little bit more about this soon. Given it's the beginning of 2025, it's a good point to talk a little bit about roadmap. We're still a small team. As Wolf mentioned, there's a lot of like backend stability things we need to work out in order to support those features a little bit better and, make it a little bit easier to implement things. But overall, our goal is, as opposed to many others, to have you actually fiddle less with your phone. So we want you to be successful in reading email, writing email, but not having to deal with everything that kind of comes in between. For the beginning of the year, we're focused a little bit more on the release feedback, the new folder drawer. We had to take some shortcuts towards the end of 2024 to make it work. So obviously there's a little bit of feedback on that we want to prioritize and make sure that people feel productive in switching between accounts. We also had a few pieces of feedback on email synchronization and IMAP push aren't working the way users expect. So we'd like to make that a little bit more clear and give a little bit more direct feedback if there was a misconfiguration or permission missing or something like that. And further in the year, we're looking to just add more ways to be more productive with Thunderbird. So, taking specific aspects of your email and figuring out how we can alleviate some of that time in between. The quick filters, for example, that you might know from Thunderbird Desktop, I'd love to see that on mobile, just because, if you wanted to see only their unread email and not just the 10,000 other emails that you just kind of said, I'm going to take care of that one later, then it's good to be able to filter and focus on specific things instead of that mountain. I also wanted to include a few topics from the community. We're using Mozilla Connect to collect ideas about Thunderbird for Android. And looking at some of the top voted features would be HTML signatures. And there's also like a send later / undo send feature request. Looking forward to those myself. There's a few good situations where I could have used those extra few seconds to unsend that email. But, in addition to all those nice and shiny things, there's a number of refactoring projects that will hopefully just make the shiny things easier to implement and make Thunderbird for Android a little bit more stable for everyone.
Thank you. That's all really exciting to hear. I know I deal with a lot of the community feedback, and I know so many people have said HTML signatures because they want to use it for work. And for work, that's kind of a big part of people's kind of just work life now. And so it's going to be exciting to see all of these things land. So thank you.
And on the roadmap, like if a user wanted to kind of watch the roadmap, as it were, is the best way to read those like monthly digests?
Yeah, I think that's probably the right spot. I'd be doing a blog post soon on some more details about these plans, using that as a mechanism to say, hey, that thing, we're not quite ready yet, or like, here's where we could use a little bit more support. So definitely a good place to get started. There's a few other channels that you can join. If you look at Thunderbird's contribute page, you can get to some of those links.
Sure, for sure. That's great.
And we will also be sure to put all of these links in the video description, so you won't have to hunt them down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, speaking of where you might need some help from contributors, that's kind of a great lead into my next question. And where is that? Like, where, if you were to pick the top, couple or few things that you're working on where you could use community or contributor help, whether that's testing or an area of code that's maybe easier to onboard people, where would you like to see some help sooner rather than later?
Yeah, code is the hardest part. So we have a couple of easier options. So one thing would be to help with translations. It is linked from our GitHub repository. We currently use Weblate. So if you speak any of the languages that the app already supports, there's a good chance the translation still needs help. Only a few of them are 100% translated, or maybe you speak a language we don't support yet. Go ahead, just add it, and at a certain point we'll include it in the app once a certain threshold of percentage of translated strings is reached. We also have support pages, support.mozilla.org. If you know your way around the app and can help other users that have questions, that is super much appreciated. We currently also have the K9mail forum, which basically also support forum. At some point, this might also be merged, so who knows? But if helping other people with their problems is your thing, that would be very much appreciated. Of course, we also take code contributions. We have a label. I think it's good first issue. Well, just check the list of labels. Yeah, you will find it.
Right.
And we have a couple of roadmap items this year. That's a lot of initial work that we as the team probably have to do, but then it's basically a recipe that has to be applied to a lot of different areas. And we will try to write that up so that contributors can help. One is changing the UI to properly support Android's edge-to-edge mechanism. We basically use the whole screen for all of the app. And another one is changing some of the very old screens we have in the app to use the modern UI framework we've talked about before. Most of that is fairly easy to do, but it's never high enough on our priority list. So once we write up like rough guidelines on how to do that, that is something that a contributor could pick up and just get done.
That's great. And you had mentioned how there's the K9 forum and also support.mozilla.org as for kind of the user support and I suppose user documentation. What about developer documentation? Where would someone find that too?
We have developer documentation. We do have some documentation in the repository itself. You could build it locally to have nice HTML pages. Currently, those are not published anywhere, I think. So if you're fine reading Markdown, you can just go to the repositories in the docs subfolder. But really, it's not like it's a super well-documented app. You can just read the documentation and understand everything about the app. It's mostly reading code and trying to figure things out. The good news is that we do have a developer channel on Matrix, so you can always ask us questions about how things work. Or maybe just start with a small change, open a pull request, and then you will get feedback on if this it's a good approach or if there's undocumented things you have to take and you have to be aware of.
Nice.
And
that might be a good place for someone that wants to get into the code a bit more to start contributing with some like developer documentation and learn more about it.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. And there's always, of course, I think one way that sometimes people forget that if you're watching this and you use Thunderbird for Android, tell your friends, tell your family, put it on their phones. Be like, hey, I know that you're wanting to move away from these things. Why don't you try this? Try it for a month. See if you enjoy it. Help them out. That's just word of mouth is so powerful. So, and that's something you can do without any kind of technical skill at all. So
right. What I also forgot about was you could just become a beta tester. We have a separate beta app in the Play Store. Install that and provide feedback. Let us know if we will test out new designs there first, new features. You can test them and let us know if you like them. If they don't work for you, let us know what your workflow is so we can accommodate that. Some people like to suggest, like, do it this specific way. That usually doesn't work out because they only have their own use case in mind, but people use email in a lot of different ways. So it's good if we know about all the different use cases. And when coming up with a design, we can then take care all of these accommodated. Whereas if people only have theirs in mind, they suggest solutions that only work for them and not for everyone.
Do you want that feedback mostly in the Matrix channels, or do you want it in Connect?
Probably not.
Zoom?
We have a topic box for beta testers.
Okay, great.
And we will put the link there. And usually whenever we have, like, especially a major new beta version, we'll put out a nice little post like, hey, beta version, this has ended. here's what's in it. Here's really what we'd like you to test. This is what we're really looking for feedback on. So, and then that all lives in the topic box. And again, we'll put the link to that.
Great.
Below. So last question, nothing to do with Android at all. What's the plan for Thunderbird on iOS?
Yeah, I take that one. So, as said, we have a really small team. So that is going to be a real challenge. We were looking for already available open source clients for iOS, and we were lucky to find any project that makes sense for us. So I think going into Thunderbird for iOS endeavor, it requires a lot of groundwork because we need to build basically a completely new app. So I think what we are aiming for is start the development of an iOS version of Thunderbird, but don't expect anything production ready this year. We're aiming to provide you with some test flight version of something working or not to have a look at, but it will be far from usable and really polished state. It will be a first step, and we try to do the whole iOS development in public, so you could have a look. There will be a repository, there will be a channel to communicate and to also give feedback. And of course, we're going to hire people specifically for iOS, but I think FOSDEM is next week, and Philipp knows the best about that.
Yeah.
How is the timeline for getting new people?
Absolutely. If all goes well, then we might have the job descriptions ready in public by FOSDEM, which I think would be great, because then we can say, hey, by the way, you could work with us. So I think it's a great opportunity. Generally, no matter what we put out, but generally, I'd like to have a team where we have someone very specialized on iOS, so that someone who's been doing this for a while and knows exactly all the ins and outs of how iOS works, since the setup that we want to have is actually a native application. There's going to be a few cross-platform pieces in this as well, so having some cross-platform knowledge on the different frameworks, Rust, Kotlin multi-platform, is definitely a plus on that. But looking forward to being able to grow the team, but also the community this year.
Well, quick follow-up question. Why would you want a native application instead of just sharing the existing code base?
That would be awesome. If that would be possible. There are opportunities we could investigate, but at the moment, this is not possible. The code bases are too different, and the platforms are also too different. So different programming language, different system, different libraries used. Not everything is available for every platform. For one, there's an IMAP protocol, for the other not. And so it's a hard problem to tackle, but ideally there is room for shared code. So having one source of truth, one package of code that could be reused and shared between Android and iOS, and ideally desktop. And this is, I think, on the long term what we're aiming for. But for the start, there's not really a base that we could easily iterate on. And I think Philipp has also his own perspective on that topic.
Yeah, sure. I think the other piece is kind of like user expectations, like the, I guess, typical or cliche expectation that an iOS user has is different from an Android user. So, for iOS specifically, there's an expectation it has to run fast, like the performance needs to be top notch. Maybe the UX is a little bit more simple, a little bit less customization, possibly, but a little bit more, defaults are running well. Whereas On Android, it's a little bit more, I want this to work exactly the way it should be working. So if we go completely multi-platform and everything is shared, then we're basically taking the Android looks and implanting that onto iOS. And I'd like to use the opportunity of this fresh start to say, okay, we're actually going to make it look like a very native iOS application. And so far, especially with the expertise that we have in the team and the community, the best approach that we're seeing is to go native with most of the UI pieces, and then use a framework like Rust or Kotlin multi-platform to use some of the shared platform pieces, as Wolf mentioned.
Excellent. So people are going to be very glad to hear that, especially when we announce that we're hiring people to kind of get that all started. And as a iOS user myself, it's going to be really nice to have that on my personal phone and not just my work phone.
Well, there are, I think, more people who are native iOS users and would like to have a Thunderbird on their phone as a daily driver. So there's a lot of motivation to have a Thunderbird for iOS app available.
Yes. Every time we post about Android, we inevitably get the question, well, when is it coming to iOS? So the answer is a lot sooner than you might expect. So,
but no hard deadline, like
no hard deadline.
process. Well, as an Android user, I absolutely love Thunderbird for Android, and I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done. But also, just as a free software nerd, I love that you guys are really paying attention to like feedback to kind of help shape what the next steps are, next priorities. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time to come here and talk about this exciting project that has exciting new steps. And for anybody that happens to be watching that's going to FOSDEM, we will have a Thunderbird booth where you can come and check out Thunderbird for Android on tablets if you want to just play around with the look and feel and don't have an Android device to do it. But if you do have an Android device, please install it and give it a try. It's very quick and easy. And you can come by the booth and say hi to these lovely folks and others. So,
and also get stickers. Let's not forget the most important part.
Yes,
that's right. Yeah, come and get stickers. Say hi, and ask any questions about Thunderbird that you might have. So yeah, thanks again, everybody. And we'll wrap it up and we'll host another community office hours next month. So, all right, say bye for now. Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Heather. Thank you, Monica.
Bye.